Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Thank you for joining the Healthcare Security Cast for Wednesday, January the 29th. I'm your host, Brian Hamilton. On today's podcast, we'll be interviewing Martin Green. Before we get to the interview, I just want to thank all of you for the support. I'm happy to say the podcast has been downloaded over 500 times in 8 different countries. Thank you for the support. It definitely means a lot. I'd love to get your feedback on the podcast and just some thoughts that you have for potential upcoming episodes, different topics you'd like to hear about. You can connect with me directly on social media. My name is Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton. I am the only Brian Hamilton on all of these social media platforms, so I'm very easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. In addition to reaching out to me directly, you can engage with the Healthcare Security Cast community. We do have a LinkedIn group and a Facebook page. If you'll be in the Toronto, Ontario area, March 11th, 2020, the IAHSS Ontario chapter is hosting an educational event. There's a great lineup of speakers, and this event is free of charge. All you have to do is register. And the registration link is in the description. Also, on July 13th, the IAHSS Ontario chapter will be hosting the 16th Annual Golf Classic. And over the last 6 years, in partnership with the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation, the IAHSS Ontario chapter has donated over $110,000 to cancer research. So definitely, if you're in the area, support this cause. The event does sell out every year, so make sure you register early. Stay tuned for registration details. And as I mentioned, our guest today is Martin Green. We'll be discussing security in a long-term care environment, as well as Martin's experience dealing with SARS and how some of those learnings can translate to addressing concerns related to the coronavirus. Martin is also a long-standing member of IAHSS and served as a past president, so we will also be discussing his experience with the association. And now let's get into the interview. We're joined today by Martin Green. Martin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
Who is Martin Green?
I'm a dedicated healthcare security professional that has found my niche in the healthcare industry, and I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing and really enjoying it and helping foster and mentor and educate and provide a safe environment for my residents, my families, my clients.
You're celebrating 5 years now working in a long-term care facility.
That's correct. Yesterday was my 5th anniversary at Baycrest.
Well, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And you've worked in obviously different environments. You've worked in some acute care facilities that are, quite busy, quite a different, quite a change of pace. What is it that has kept you in long-term care? What is it that's really taken your interest?
Well, it's funny. When I started working in healthcare back in 1985, I think I was the youngest security manager in a hospital in the city of Toronto. And now, all these years later, I'm the oldest, and I work in a geriatric and long-term care home, so it seems to be appropriate. But the difference with long-term care is the personal relationships that you can establish with the residents and clients that are part of your organization. In an acute care hospital, you don't really get to know anybody other than the staff. And our residents and clients and their families have really interesting stories, and you do get to know them at a different level.
All right, now, one thing I want to pull out of that, you said there's some very unique and interesting stories. What's unique about your facility?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about Baycrest is that, we cater to a Jewish population primarily, and we have a very large number of Holocaust survivors that call Baycrest their home. And, they either survived the Holocaust or they're World War II veterans. There are a couple of gentlemen that I've gotten to know quite well over the years that were fighter pilots during World War II. One did missions into the European campaign, and the other was in the Aleutian Islands, protecting the west coast of the world. And, I've met people that lived through the Holocaust and have written books about their experiences. And recently I discovered from a woman that I've known for several years at Baycrest that she was actually born in a concentration camp. And, it's those dynamics and those personal stories that really add value to what you do. And you realize that, healthcare isn't about making a profit for people. It's about ensuring that people have a safe and secure environment for them to call home.
Now, what are some of the unique security challenges that come with a long-term care facility?
Well, one of the nice things about it is that we don't have some of the major issues that acute care has. We don't have an emergency department. We don't have operating rooms or maternity units. And those are all the facilities or the departments in other hospitals that are problem zones. And at Baycrest, we don't have that. So the different level of care that we have, the fact that we cater to an aging population, the average age of our residents and clients is about 85. Dementia and Alzheimer's is a serious problem, and exit seeking or elopement is my primary concern. So my biggest focus is to ensure that our residents are in a safe environment where they're free to roam around, but also prevented and protected from leaving and harming themselves.
Okay, and do you ever have issues with, say, family members or care attendants? Any staff investigations that ever happen as a result of working with an elder population?
Occasionally, we do have reports of abuse or alleged abuse. Family members will come in and they'll see their mother or their family member in the room, and they'll think that they've been neglected or abused, and they'll create a fuss and start behaving inappropriately and yelling at staff, which could result in security involvement. But primarily the environment is a little quieter and less of that occurs than you would expect.
Now, you mentioned as well that the community that you serve at your healthcare facility is mainly a Jewish community. Are there any unique challenges that come with that?
To a degree, yes, because let's face it, there's a lot of racism and anti-Semitism in the world right now. It's a really scary place, and people of the Jewish faith have had to endure that for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years of people hating them. And I'm not Jewish, but you can see how upsetting it is for the employees that we have and the residents and patients that we have that are Jewish. So when something bad happens to the Jewish community elsewhere in the world, you can sense that they're scared. And, they're looking towards me to ensure that they're safe. And I'm doing everything possible to ensure their safety, but none of us can guarantee it. And again, when something bad happens to the Jewish community, you feel it personally now, working in the Jewish environment. A couple of years ago, we have a museum at my hospital, and somebody got into the museum after hours, and they did something that wasn't particularly nice, and it was offensive, and it was classified as a hate crime, and it was reported to the police and classified as a hate crime. And unfortunately, we never caught the person that did it. But you could tell that the community in the hospital was very upset by what had happened.
Now, you have a lot of residents at your facility. Are there any unique challenges that come with people actually calling the hospital home?
No, absolutely not. It is their home. It is absolutely their home, and I am their, in all intents and purposes, I'm their servant. I'm there for them, and I'm honored to be invited to help them in their homes. And, there are a couple of unusual challenges because, they forget that they share that home with almost 1,000 other people. But still, to be able to meet and talk to the residents in their homes, be invited into their apartment or their unit and have them share stories is really quite interesting.
What advice would you offer to a healthcare security professional who's transitioning into a long-term care facility?
Slow down, take a step back, enjoy it, and get to know the people that you are there to serve. You don't get that opportunity in an acute care hospital. You've got 100,000 people a year walking through your emergency department. You don't get that pleasure. And it truly is a pleasure to sit and have a coffee with one of the residents, or to help them, even if it's just holding open the elevator door while they get off the elevator, or walking down the hallway and sticking your head in their room and saying hello to them. Just get to enjoy the people that you are working for.
Now, you also have oversight of emergency management. And when you're doing tabletop exercises, I'm sure it's challenging not having an emerge department because it gives you less scenarios. What are some of the things that you would do in these exercises?
Well, rather than dealing with the flood of mass casualties, we tend to look at things that are going to affect or impact our infrastructure. So we did participate in the GTA-wide exercise that took place in November, but again, we're not an acute care hospital. We don't have an emergency department, so it was quite easy for us in comparison to Humber Hospital or Trillium Hospital or William Osler, where they got hit hard with casualties. So when I look at exercises, I tend to look at things that will impact the organization in a negative way, and that tends to be around infrastructure failure. So a loss of water, or a loss of power, or a loss of the infrastructure for IT. And that is equally as challenging to a healthcare facility as having a sudden influx of patients.
Now, for you, coming from from a faster paced environment, what were some of the changes you made to adapt to the long-term care environment?
I'd been out of the acute care environment for a while because between my last hospital and my current hospital, I worked in the private sector for a security guard company, and that got me out of the fast-paced life of acute care. And after spending 3.5 years working for the security company, it was a nice step back into the environment that I really love and that I've really grown in. So I didn't really have that much of an adjustment to make.
So Martin, you also mentioned you'd spent some time working during SARS. What was that like? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was the worst, greatest 4 months of my career. It was terrifying, exhilarating. It was scary. It was fun. It was everything bad and everything good all at the same time. I mean, because you didn't know what was walking in the door, and you weren't letting anybody walk in the door. And we went from having, I had a staff of 3 people on the day shift at my hospital, and I went from 3 people to 25 security officers overnight. And I wasn't able to get 25 security officers, so we were just arbitrarily making people in the organization a security guard. And we were making things up as we went, and we were sort of leading the curve. And some of the things that we were doing at my hospital, the province was picking up on and suggesting that other hospitals do. And I remember when it started and the Code Orange was officially declared, we were all sitting in a big meeting room watching the minister talk on television. And when the broadcast was over, the CEO turned and looked at me and he said, "Okay, Martin, the hospital's yours. What do you need?" And my first thought was I need a vacation. But we were making stuff up, flying by the seat of our pants, doing everything possible to ensure that we were providing a safe environment. It was scary. It was very scary. And at the beginning, I went 4 days with not going home. I was at work for 4 solid days, taking 10-minute naps on a boardroom couch and not seeing my children and, wearing the same clothes that I came in on and, terrified of what was happening. But again, it was exhilarating. It was scary. It was fun. It was maddening, and just an unbelievable experience, the highlight of my career.
Diving into the SARS experience a little bit more, obviously we're dealing with corona right now, and corona and SARS are 2 different viruses. Are there any learnings from the SARS experience that can be applied to addressing the coronavirus?
Well, the experiences that we went through with SARS wrote us a rule book that didn't exist before. And that is certainly a huge help, as we're having meetings here at Baycrest Hospital even this afternoon to talk about our response to Corona. We're pulling out the SARS rule book and playbook that we had from the last time. And it's allowing us to adapt, and it's allowing us to recognize what's going on and also what isn't going on. And that just makes it a whole heck of a lot easier for us in the hospital to deal with it.
After going through SARS, what are some of the lessons learned?
The SARS crisis was, I think, different and quite unique from what's going on with Corona. And I think the biggest difference between the two is that we didn't know what SARS was. It was a new disease that hadn't existed before. No one knew how it was transmitted, whether it was droplet or contact or any other means, and they didn't know how to treat it once it was diagnosed. So that's, I think, the biggest difference between the two. We know what the coronavirus is. We're pretty sure we know how it's transmitted and how it's taught or goes between people to people, and that makes it a little bit easier. It's also, although it can be a fatal disease for some people, it doesn't seem to be as severe as SARS was. So it just makes life a little bit easier for us. Plus, based on the experience we had going through SARS in 2003, we're better prepared to deal with this corona.
What precautions can the average person take?
Well, if you work in a healthcare facility as a security officer, the primary thing would just be following your standard hand hygiene processes. Washing your hands when you come into work, washing your hands when you have contact with an individual. The 4 or 5 points of hand hygiene in a hospital are standard. Wash your hands before going into the room, wash your hands before you touch the patient, wash your hands after you touch the patient, and then wash your hands after you leave the room. Those are standard things we should be doing all the time anyway. So that's the most important thing, is just following hand hygiene protocols that exist every day of the year in a hospital, and trying not to get too freaked out over this. It's scary, but it's manageable, and we have to ensure that hysteria doesn't overtake common sense.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question just about IAHSS. You served as the president. What was it like when you got that phone call? I'm sure you remember that moment, but can you just kind of walk me through that? What was it like for you?
Well, it was interesting because there were 2 Canadians on the ballot the year that I won, and when I saw this other gentleman's name, I thought, I don't have any chance of winning. It's going to be 99 votes for him and 1 vote for me, and that'll be my vote for myself. And I fully expected to lose. So when I got the call from the executive director, Colleen, I was at the Ontario Hospital Association show, and I got a voice message, and it was, "Hi, Martin, it's Colleen. The results are in. Can you call me?" So I called her back and I got her voicemail, and I said, "Hi, Colleen, it's Martin, and yeah, I know I lost, so it's okay. I'm fine with that." And about 10 minutes later, she called and said, "Hey, Martin, it's Colleen." And I said, "Yeah, I know I lost." And she said, "No, actually, you won." And I thought, "Really?" I think I'm the only person that's ever won an election that suggested there might be a recount necessary. But I was absolutely flattered and honored to have been selected. And shortly after that phone call with Colleen, I got a phone call from the other person that I was on the ballot against, and he phoned to congratulate me. And it was very, very humbling and a true honor to have been elected.
Now, you've been involved with the association too for quite some time. Can you just walk me through your experience with IAHSS? How did you get started, and what have you done over the years?
Well, I've been a long-term member. I on 2 separate occasions I was a member, and then left healthcare and came back to healthcare and joined up again. And I was a member in name only, and I would get the emails, or I'd get the mail. And I really didn't participate. Like I got what I saw. But back at that time in 1999, there were only a half dozen members in all of Eastern Canada with IAHSS. The West Coast had quite a number, but there really wasn't anything happening. And around the time of SARS, I got a phone call from Thomas Smith, who was the president at the time, and we exchanged some stuff because my hospital was very active with SARS during that time, and he had some concerns, and we shared information. And when it was all over, Tom reached out to me and he said, I'd like you to become more involved. And I said, well, I don't know, what am I going to do? And he said, would you consider being the Eastern Canada chairperson? And there had never been a chairperson for Eastern Canada. And I hemmed and hawed, and I said, I don't know. I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't think I'm qualified enough. I don't know. And he kindly sort of, I don't want to say forced, but convinced me to take it on as a trial. And it was amazing. I just started learning so many different things and being able to reach out. And, we went from having half a dozen members in all of Eastern Canada to well over 100. We went from having no chapters to having 4 chapters. We went from having no CHPAs to I don't know how many CHPAs, no programs of distinctions to at least a half a dozen. So the experience really showed me how much the association has to offer professionally and personally. And it was the best phone call that I ever got. And I'm so glad that Tom Smith convinced me. And, whenever I get a chance to shout out to Tom and thank him for that opportunity, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him.
Right. And you mentioned Tom Smith specifically. Were there any other people who kind of mentored you along during your time?
Oh, so many. I mean, every president that I served under when I was on the board, Brian Warren, Tony York, Bonnie Michaelman, Lisa Terry, and I hate mentioning names because I'm afraid I'm going to forget somebody and make them feel left out, but I haven't forgotten everything that everybody has done for me. Everybody has just been so friendly and so cooperative and so eager to help mentor, train, and educate and share their experiences with you to make you a better person as well. And, even people that didn't serve as president, but other board members, and people like Ben Scaglione and David LaRose, who've become really close personal friends and, like buddies for life. They really, really showed me how much I didn't know and helped me learn what I needed to learn.
Now, is there anything that stands out? Because we've talked extensively just about the things that you've accomplished and things that you've done over your career. Is there anything that stands out as a high point for you? Something that you're most proud of?
I think 2 things. I'm most proud of the fact that I got my CHPA, my Certified Healthcare Protection Administrator designation. I got that in 2008. And that to me was a sentinel point that I was just so proud to get that, to find out that I'd passed on my first attempt at the conference in Vancouver. So that was a high point. And obviously the biggest high point for IAHSS was being elected president. I mean, it was just such a true honor and a pleasure to have been elected and serve.
Right now we have some young professionals here with us, or I guess budding young professionals, aspiring young professionals, if you will. What advice do you have for people entering the industry?
Well, if you want to work in the security industry or the law enforcement industry, start working in a hospital first, because you will get more exposure to life lessons working in a healthcare environment than you will in any other sector of the security industry. If you get into healthcare and you love it, like I did, and working in a hospital was the last place I ever thought that I would work. And 35 years later, I can't imagine working anywhere else, is that never stop learning. Because even though I've been in the industry a long time, there's a lot more stuff that I don't know about than I do know. And being able to call upon people that I've met through the association or just in the industry in general and getting help and assistance from them. So never stop learning, never stop taking courses, never stop networking. Living in a little bubble in your own little hospital isn't the way to run a successful program. You need to get out there and learn from others that are doing the same job on how they're doing it.
So recently, your facility actually celebrated 100 years in existence. So obviously, being an older building, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you came in as the new security director?
Well, just to clarify, Baycrest has been around 100 years, but not in the same location. So we moved up to our current facility in the mid-50s. I think 1953 is the oldest building that we have. And then a building was built in the 60s, another building in the 80s, and our newest building was opened in 2000. So my introduction to Baycrest 5 years ago, I think 3 days on the job, was a burst water pipe and a flood. Due to cold weather, and there've been a lot of that. So dealing with an aging infrastructure, and healthcare organizations over the years have had budget constraints, and a lot of facilities, in order to continue to provide the level of service that they want to, will scale back on some infrastructure repairs, or I don't want to say neglect, but they will focus their energies and their efforts on other things and may not be aware that the infrastructure is failing. So that has been the greatest challenge, is an older facility. 1953 is still a 60-plus-year-old building, and things were built differently back then than they are now. There's changes in codes, there's changes in construction style, there's changes in all sorts of things. So the aging infrastructure of any hospital is a big challenge.
All right. And just in closing, how can people get in touch with you? How would you like for people to reach out to you? I know you're active on social media.
I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Twitter. And I also have a Facebook page. But they can email me directly. My email address is magreen@baycrest.org. And I spell green the right way without an E on the end. So it's magreen@baycrest.org.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Martin.
My absolute pleasure.
And I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
All right. Thank you very much for the offer, Brian.
And that concludes another installment of the Healthcare Security Cast. Thank you for joining us. I do appreciate all of your support. And I just want to remind you to engage with us on social media. We do have a LinkedIn group, the Healthcare Security Cast community, as well as a Facebook page. And again, I encourage all of you to connect with me directly on social media. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Join us again next week when we have a new guest and we'll be discussing a new topic. Until then, take care.